My grandma tried to erase my dad from existence, so I gave her the ending she deserved. When Duncan threw that phone onto the roof and told the nuns to go to the underworld, I clapped. Quietly. In the car. I watched him through the dusty windows of that chapel school hybrid my Oma loved so much, his fists clenched like two tiny thunderclouds, his mouth still twisted in fury. That was the moment I knew we were all screwed, and also the moment I realized Duncan might be the only one of us with guts. He got expelled. Oma did nothing. Of course she didn't. Doing nothing was her favorite thing in the world, right after poisoning people's lives under the guise of pious guidance. Let me back up. My mom and dad met through my uncle Don. Don and my dad were best friends back in elementary school, that sort of inseparable codependent childhood friendship people romanticize until they grow up and realize it's mostly born out of shared trauma and no one else wanting to sit next to them. Through Don, my dad met my mom. She was the quiet one. Bookish, sweet, and, according to both of them, a little too eager to please. It wasn't a big romance. More like inertia. After my dad left the military, where he did things no one talks about at dinner, Grandma Freebie, the good grandma, and she's dead now, and my mom ganged up to convince him to settle down. Reed wore him down until he married my mom out of obligation and maybe a dash of guilt. Love was not involved. My dad says that a lot, but never when my mom's around. Oma, my dad's mother, hated that. Not just because she didn't like mom. No, Oma hated the whole idea of my dad getting anything good. Because she lived vicariously through her kids, and Don, her golden boy, was always supposed to outshine my dad. When that didn't happen, she redirected her venom toward dad with the focus of a surgeon. The things she'd say about him to mom were calculated. Surgical. Tiny cuts that didn't bleed until years later. He's not really smart, you know? Just a good test taker. I don't think he even finished college. You ever see a diploma? He's probably exaggerating that injury. Men like that always need attention. And my mom? She listened. Nodded. Internalized it all until it calcified into something darker. She'd repeat Oma's doubts in bed with dad, then say she didn't mean it like that. The real damage started with the church. This school church hybrid that Oma loved like a second womb, it was all about power. There was a clique of rich parishioners who ran everything. They donated organs and stained glass windows and expected sainthood in return. Oma wanted to be close to them more than anything. She saw status like salvation. She convinced my mom to send Duncan and my sister to that school under the guise of spiritual education, but we all knew what it was really about: proximity. The kids at that school were monsters. The rich ones, anyway. They could sense poverty like bloodhounds, and they smelled it on Duncan. We weren't destitute, but we weren't legacy families either. Duncan got picked on relentlessly. He'd come home with bruises, shoes missing, once with a sharp drawing of a private part on his forehead. The teachers? They just smiled and told him to be strong like the saints. Oma knew. She always knew. But she wanted to stay in good graces with those families. So she told Duncan to toughen up and told mom he was dramatic. She called dad overly sensitive when he tried to pull Duncan out. Said he was trying to undermine her community. Then came the explosion. Duncan threw one of the rich kids' iPhones onto the chapel roof during morning assembly and screamed that everyone could burn. They expelled him that afternoon. The nuns didn't even call home, they called Oma. And she smiled. Told them she understood. Said she hoped we'd raise him better. Mom cried. Dad raged. Oma sat there during dinner that night and suggested we take a break from church until things calmed down. Like we were the embarrassment. A few months later, Mom packed us up and moved to South Dakota. Just me, her, and Duncan. I was only 4 at the time, barely remember it. Dad stayed behind. Oma visited often. Too often. She used Don's accident as her entry point. He'd had a head injury in a construction accident, mild traumatic brain injury. Memory loss. Emotional control issues. And Oma weaponized it like she'd been waiting her whole life for it. She sat next to his hospital bed and whispered poison. Told him dad had always looked down on him. That dad blamed him for ruining their childhood. She showed him fake letters dad never wrote. Made up stories about arguments that never happened. Every time we visited Don, his eyes got colder. Until one day he told dad to stay the hell away and never explained why. Mom watched all of this and said nothing. She thought it was safer not to choose sides. Then came me. I wasn't born yet when all that started. I came during the calm, a false one. By the time I was 7, Oma had started her campaign on me too. Gentle at first. Like someone testing a lock before they break in. Did you know your dad never graduated college? Your dad's illness? Probably in his head. He's always been dramatic. You're smart like your Uncle Don, not like your dad. That's good. It always came when Mom wasn't in the room. Or when Dad was out on the porch smoking the last pack he'd promised to quit. I believed her for a long time. I think Mom did too. By the time we moved back in with Dad, the damage was permanent. Oma used to show up unannounced. Just appear. Like a bad smell that learned how to drive. She'd bring cheap cookies and passive-aggressive comments. Tell Duncan he was finally growing into his face and ask if my sister had lost weight yet. She'd call Dad by his full name, first, middle, last, like she was reciting a curse. She once told me to pray that I don't end up like him, and when I asked what that meant, she just smiled and said, "You'll see." And I did. Over the next few years, I watched my family rot from the inside out. But that wasn't even the worst of it. The worst was what she did to the dog. Update 1. The dog's name was Copper. Not because of his color, he was jet black, but because that's what Oma said he smelled like. Like old pennies and dirty coins, she told my mom the first time she met him. I was 9 then, and I thought she was joking. She wasn't. Copper was a rescue. Nervous, quiet, the kind of dog that crept into rooms like he was asking for permission to exist. Duncan adored him. Said he reminded him of himself. Same haunted eyes. Same twitchy flinch when someone raised their voice. They were inseparable. My sister too. For once, there was peace in the house. Oma hated it. She said dogs were dirty distractions and idolized like false gods in this house. She complained every time she visited. Said the dog took up all the air. That we were soft for treating animals like family. One weekend when Mom and Dad went to a wedding out of state, Oma volunteered to babysit us. We woke up the second morning and Copper was gone. We searched for hours, backyard, neighbors, woods behind the house. Oma sat in the kitchen with a crossword puzzle and said maybe he ran off. Animals can smell weakness. It was Duncan who found the collar. In the trash. Wrapped in a plastic bag under a pile of bleach bottles. When Dad came back and confronted her, she didn't deny it. He bit me, she said. And that's that. He was dangerous. You're lucky I didn't call animal control. Copper had never bitten anyone. Never growled. Barely barked. We knew. We all knew. Dad didn't speak to her for 6 months after that. That was the longest we ever went without seeing her. We thought maybe that would be the end of it. But people like Oma don't need proximity to ruin things. They just need cracks. She started sending letters. Not to the house, directly to me and my sister at school. Handwritten notes folded into my lunchbox. Slipped between the pages of my textbooks. She had friends at the school, old church contacts. She'd hand them notes and say, make sure he gets this. It's family business. They were always framed like wisdom. Proverbs mixed with poison. Your father is weak, but that doesn't mean you have to be. Sometimes a soldier comes back broken and breaks everyone else. Don't let him break you too. The way he lies about being sick? That's not love. That's manipulation. Watch him. I kept them. All of them. At first because I was scared. Then because I started to believe her. It wasn't hard. Dad wasn't well. Not physically. Not mentally. Years of military life had carved holes into him that never quite healed. He'd disappear into his own mind sometimes, long, blank stares where we'd have to repeat his name 5 or 6 times before he blinked. He had these awful coughing fits. Chest pain. Joint stiffness so bad he couldn't hold a fork some mornings. Oma said it was all an act. That he was playing the martyr to make us pity him. She'd call when he was too sick to answer the door and leave voicemails like, I saw the trash wasn't out this morning. Guess the hero couldn't manage. Or, tell him to stop faking before people start to think it's hereditary. When I was 13, she cornered me after a school play right there by the vending machines before Mom could reach us. She leaned down, her breath like cinnamon and spite, and whispered, he's not your real hero, you know? Your Uncle Don? Now that was a man. Then she smiled and handed me a $5 bill for doing well on stage. That was the moment I started hating her openly. But hate doesn't make you immune. Hate just makes you keep the letters in a shoebox under your bed even when you know you should burn them. Things spiraled the year my sister hit high school. Oma decided she needed refinement. That she was becoming too worldly. She offered to pay for her to attend a private Christian academy, one of those places with uniforms, prayer before lunch, and purity pledges. My mom, exhausted and desperate, agreed. It was a disaster. My sister got bullied within an inch of her sanity. Mocked for her clothes, her accent, the way she pronounced certain words. Girls left pamphlets on her desk that said things like, modest is hottest and silence is a virtue. She developed a stutter. Stopped making eye contact. I caught her once praying in the bathroom, not to God, but to disappear. We begged Mom to pull her out. Dad tried. Oma said we were raising another Duncan. She's emotional. That's all. She needs discipline. When my sister finally snapped and slapped a girl who called her the school whore, they suspended her for 2 weeks. Oma? She said it was proof she needed more structure. That night, I walked into her room with a screwdriver and unscrewed every leg from the antique vanity Oma had given her. I stacked the legs neatly in the closet and left a note that said, she doesn't need your furniture. She needs you to leave her alone. It wasn't brave. It wasn't even that clever. But it was the first time I felt like I could fight back. And Oma noticed. She stopped speaking to me after that. At least directly. But she wasn't done. She just moved on to something worse. She started working on Mom again. Update 2. Oma didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The way she worked on Mom was quieter. Slower. Like erosion. Like salt water on steel. Mom was always the buffer. The softener. She'd sit at the kitchen table and draw invisible shapes on her mug when Dad got too loud. When Duncan got suspended again. When my sister locked herself in the bathroom and wouldn't answer to her name. Oma played on that. She started inviting Mom to tea. Not brunch. Not coffee. Tea. Like it was a sacred ritual. Just the two of them. No kids. No distractions. No Dad. At first, Mom would come home smelling like lavender and guilt. Her eyes red-rimmed. Her hands shaking as she unpacked a bag of dried herbs or inspirational scripture cards Oma insisted were for emotional grounding. We didn't ask what they talked about. We already knew. But then Mom changed. Little things at first. She started using Oma's phrases. Emotional manipulation. Pattern of male dominance. Spiritual misdirection. One night, after Dad forgot to pick up groceries again, something he always forgot, Mom said, deadpan. Your father's illness is a shield. He hides behind it like a coward. It didn't sound like her. It sounded exactly like Oma. By the time I was 15, Mom was fully split between two personas. Around Dad, she was terse. Businesslike. Civil but cold. Around Oma, she was obedient. Wide-eyed. Fragile. She stopped defending Dad altogether. When Oma told her that military men crave violence because peace makes them irrelevant, Mom just nodded. When Oma claimed that Dad once called Duncan a burden, something that never happened, Mom believed her. When Oma suggested that maybe the reason my sister got bullied at school was because she invited it, Mom didn't say a word. And then Oma started her visits again. But this time she didn't bring cookies. She brought pamphlets. Therapy guides from churches with names like Healing the Feminine Heart and Breaking the Cycle of Weak Men. She'd leave them on the coffee table on the back of the toilet in our backpacks. Places she knew we'd find them. The worst part? They started working. On me. At first, I read them out of morbid curiosity. Then I started questioning things. Doubting my memories. Thinking maybe Oma's right. Maybe Dad's just pretending to be sick. Maybe he really did sabotage Uncle Don. I didn't say it out loud. But I started watching Dad differently. Every time he groaned getting out of a chair. Every time he rubbed his shoulder or forgot the name of a coworker. I didn't see pain. I saw performance. It's terrifying, the things you believe when someone whispers them long enough. I started to hate him. Not for what he did, but for what Oma said he did. That's how far gone we were. Then came the summer of the confrontation. We were supposed to go camping, just me, Dad, and Duncan. A last-ditch effort maybe to reconnect before Duncan moved out. Mom backed out last minute, said her energy wasn't aligned. That was the phrase she'd picked up from Oma's circle of spiritual parasites. So it was just the three of us. And on the second night around the fire, Duncan lost it. It started with marshmallows. Dad burned one. Said he liked the char. Duncan snapped. That's just like you. Ruining everything and acting like it's how you meant to do it. Dad froze. I laughed. Not at the joke. At the venom. The truth in Duncan's voice. Dad said something soft. That's not fair. And Duncan stood up, kicked the log pile, and screamed. You're not sick. You're lazy. You've always been lazy. You let Oma ruin Mom, ruin us, and you just sat there. The silence after was suffocating. Dad didn't yell. Didn't defend himself. He just looked at us, me and Duncan, and said, I don't know how to fix it. That was when I realized he wasn't lying. He wasn't faking. He was just tired. Not weak. Spent. We didn't finish the trip. Packed up early. Drove home in silence. Duncan moved out 2 weeks later. Never came back. That's when Oma escalated. She told Mom she was cursed. Said there was spiritual rot in the family. Said it was Dad. Said we needed to be cleansed. And Mom believed her. Started burning sage at the dinner table. Anointed the door frames with oil. Asked us not to touch Dad's clothes. Said we might carry his affliction. That was the year I stopped calling her Mom in my head. Just like that. She was Oma's puppet now. And I wasn't far behind. Next update coming. It gets worse. Because this is when Oma started using my name. My future. My blood as a tool. The first time Oma asked for my social security number, I thought she was joking. She framed it like a gift. You're almost 16, she said, folding a flyer from the vocational school she liked into my hoodie pocket. You'll need credit soon. I can help. I know a man who can get you a starter card. Just a $300 limit. Build trust. You'll thank me later. I remember looking at her and thinking, she's helping. This is normal. Families do this. So I gave it to her. 2 months later, I got a letter in the mail saying I was pre-approved for a car loan. I didn't have a job. Didn't even have a learner's permit yet. When I asked Mom about it, she said, Oma probably put you as an authorized user on one of her cards. That's how they build credit now. But she didn't say it like she believed it. She said it like she was afraid of knowing the real answer. By the time I was 17, Oma had opened 4 credit cards in my name. 2 were maxed out. 1 was in collections. 1 had a mysterious charge from a church retreat I'd never attended. When I confronted her angry, shaking, all teenage indignation, she didn't flinch. She smiled. Do you want to go to college? Because I've paid your application fees. Do you want to drive? Because I used that limit to get your down payment started. You should be thanking me. I told her I didn't ask for any of that. She just laughed and said, no one in this family asks. They take. That's how it works. I punched a hole in her drywall that night. Left it. Didn't patch it. Let her live with the evidence. She told everyone I was emotionally unstable. Mom believed her. Dad said nothing. I spent my 18th birthday at the DMV trying to correct my credit record. They told me the cards were legally ambiguous since she'd listed herself as a cosigner. Said I'd have to pursue it in civil court. I didn't have the energy. Instead, I got a second job at a car wash. Saved every penny. Stopped answering Oma's calls. Then she showed up at my job. Not at the car wash. At the storage unit where I worked nights. alone, mostly watching for loiterers and making sure the camera feed didn't freeze. She waited until my break, knocked on the little glass booth I sat in, smiled like nothing was wrong, and handed me a manila envelope. Inside photos. Not of me, not of Duncan, not even of Mom, of Dad. Medical records, doctor's notes, x-rays, neurological assessments, blood work, VA paperwork. She said nothing while I read them. When I looked up, she was already speaking. See? It's all real. Every symptom, every diagnosis. He's been sick longer than you've been alive. I asked why she was showing me this. Why now? And she leaned in, eyes wide, voice trembling. Not with sadness, but with something colder. Because I lied, she whispered. I made it all up. Every story, every rumor, every little dig. I stared. She smiled wider. I wanted your mother to hate him, and it worked. I wanted Dawn to turn on him, and he did. I wanted you to doubt him, and you did. And now I want you to understand why. She placed a second envelope on the desk. Copy of her will. I'm leaving everything to you, she said. The house, the savings, even the burial plot. You get it all, but only if you promise me one thing. I didn't ask. She told me anyway. Erase him. Erase my dad. Not physically, not loudly, just socially, legally, emotionally. Remove him from emergency contacts. Don't list him on college applications. Don't bring him to graduations or weddings. Don't post pictures of him online. Don't say his name. Make him vanish. Make it so that when people look back, they wonder if he was ever real at all. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I closed the booth door and told her to leave. She did. 2 weeks later, she updated the will anyway. Mom confirmed it. She was there. She sat in the lawyer's office, hands folded, eyes down. She watched Oma sign everything to me. Dawn got nothing. My sister got nothing. Duncan wasn't even mentioned. It was like Oma was creating a new family from scratch, one obedient heir at a time. I was the golden child now. I was the legacy. I was the erase tool. And it worked for a while. Until the night I found my dad crying on the back porch. Next update is the final one. It's not what you think. But it is exactly what she deserved. The night I found my dad crying on the porch, I almost walked past him. It was late. The house was quiet. I just finished patching a spreadsheet for work and went out to breathe. I expected silence, maybe a raccoon in the trash. Not him. Not that. He was sitting in the dark, arms folded over his knees like a boy waiting for punishment. He didn't look up when I slid the door open. Didn't flinch when I sat next to him. He was shaking not from cold, from something else. Something deeper. I buried my father when I was 17, he said. Voice flat, eyes forward. He didn't cry. Not once. Never saw him even blink when we lowered the casket. I didn't answer. I used to think that was strength, he whispered. Now I think it was rot. He didn't cry because there was nothing left inside. He looked at me then. Really looked. I don't want to be that man. And he wasn't. He wasn't. Oma just couldn't stand that. She'd built her identity on silence, on unspoken agreements, on control. But crying? In front of your son? That was rebellion. That was blasphemy. I told him everything. Right there. Under the stars between mosquito bites and stale porch air. I laid it out. The credit cards. The forged documents. The photos. The will. The offer. The deal she tried to make with my blood. He didn't speak. Just nodded. Tears kept coming. And when they stopped, he laughed. Quiet. Hollow. Of course she did, he said. She always hated me most when I was happy. I expected rage. What I got was resolve. 2 days later, he called a lawyer. 3 days later, Duncan came back. 5 days later, the house wasn't mine anymore. Let me explain. Oma's will had a clause. Poison pill. If any of the named beneficiaries attempted to dismantle or dispute the distribution, even indirectly, the will would be void. Everything would default to probate. She'd written that clause just for me, just in case I changed. But Dad? He knew a way around it. He asked me to renounce the inheritance before she died. Legally, it meant nothing. Spiritually? It was everything. I signed the paperwork in a sterile office with buzzing fluorescent lights and a receptionist who looked like she hadn't blinked since Tuesday. It felt like I was cutting my own throat. But Dad smiled. He said, now she has nothing to hold over you. And he was right. But that's not the ending. The ending came 6 months later. Oma had a stroke. Not a big one. Just enough to steal her left side. Her speech. Her control. She ended up in a church-run rehab home. One of those faux compassionate places that smell like antiseptic and old plastic flowers. The kind of place where even the crosses on the wall look embarrassed to be there. Mom visited twice. Dawn sent a postcard. I waited. I didn't visit. Not for months. Then one day I walked in unannounced. She was in a wheelchair, tucked into a corner by the window. Eyes cloudy. Mouth twisted. A woman who'd once dictated everything, now unable to hold a pen. I stood there. Watched her breathing. Thought about Copper. About the letters. About every insult she whispered while folding laundry with my sister. About the erasure she tried to script into me like a birthright. She blinked. Slowly. Recognition flickered. And then panic. She tried to speak. Mumbled something slurred and guttural. I leaned in close. Do you remember the dog? I whispered. Her eyes widened. Do you remember how you said he bit you? She made a noise. A whimper. I pulled something from my coat pocket. Not a weapon. Not a photo. Just her Bible. The one she'd underlined in red ink. The one she used like a sword. I'd found it in a box labeled Gifts for the Next Generation. I opened it to the back cover. Read her own handwriting out loud. Blessed are the pure, for they shall see God. I smiled. Then I tore the page out, folded it slowly, and dropped it in her lap. She started crying. I walked away. Didn't say goodbye. The nurse asked if I was family. I said no. She erased that. She died 3 months later. No funeral. No obituary. No one claimed her ashes. I got a call asking what I wanted to do with them. I said flush them. They didn't. But I like to think someone did. Mom never really recovered. She's quiet now. Haunted. Like someone permanently half asleep. Dad lives near a lake. Grows tomatoes. Smiles more. Duncan teaches history at a school that lets him wear hoodies and say words like imperialist without getting fired. My sister lives in another country. Changed her name. Sends postcards with no return address. And me? I kept the shoebox full of Oma's letters. Not to remember her, but to remind myself. You don't inherit evil. You choose it. And sometimes the most merciful thing you can do to a person is let them live long enough to see themselves rot. Edit. Yes, I flushed a page from her Bible. Not for drama. For balance. She wrote scripture like it was a spell. I gave it back like an answer. Edit 2. People keep asking if I regret it. Regret implies the action didn't fit the crime. This did. She wrote a life like a lie. I just gave her a true ending.